Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Europe Center. I'm Christophe Crombez, and I am very happy to be able to introduce our speaker for today, Maciej Potz. Maciej is professor of political science at the University of Łódź in Poland. His primary research interests lie in the field of religion and politics, and then specifically he's interested in theocracies, and he studies political strategies of religious actors in contemporary democracies, and especially in his home country in Poland and here in the United States. He's at Stanford at the Europe Center this entire academic year. So if you want to talk to him, you can easily find him at the Europe Center. And I'm sure that he will be willing to discuss your research interests with you. He's working on a project this year on determinants of cohesion and longevity of religious groups and costly signaling in that respect. And that is also what he's going to talk about today. His talk today is costly signaling, power, and religious behavior. What can we learn from the Skoptsy? So Maciej will talk for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we will have time for a Q&A session. We have the Q&A feature enabled. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can find that Q&A feature. If you want to ask a question, please enter your question there in writing. You can do that during the talk. You don't need to wait until the end. You can do that during the talk, and then I will go through the list of questions at the end of Maciej's presentation during the Q&A session. There's also a live transcription that is enabled, so you can also find that at the bottom of your screen. Maciej, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Christophe, for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to do my project here at Europe Center and to present my work today. So as an introduction, since my topic today is not the usual religion and politics topic, I would say, so let me put this in a perspective. Mostly the research in religion politics, or what I call political science of religion, is done on either the macro or a meso level. So at the macro level, we look at religious organizations as political actors interacting with other actors within a political system, such as government institutions, or political parties, interest groups, or other religious organizations. And we usually look at them in a kind of black box way, where the religious organization is a unitary organization represented by its leadership. The useful, one of many possible, but probably the most useful theoretical lens for this is the economic or transactional perspective, where these organizations are sometimes treated or analyzed as firms within the market, providing religious goods to their clients, believers, in competition with other organizations. And so there's a lot of excellent research in this kind of paradigm. Prime example is Stanford's own Professor Maciej, who's done excellent work on Catholic Church as a political actor in a number of countries, analyzing the strategies that this actor uses to pursue its goals. On the meso level, we try to look inside this box and then treat the religious organization or religious movement, religious actor as a kind of social group of people susceptible to political mobilization. And we look at factors of this religion-based political mobilization, such as political opportunity structure, or the environment in which the group, the actor, has to take into account, devising its strategies, resources that it has at its disposal, both material and kind of leadership or organizational, the motives, grievances that lead to political action. One useful theoretical perspective for this is social movements theory that has been adapted to religious actors by Walt Silverman and Freedy, for instance. So these are the main approaches to religion and politics. But these approaches, even though they are very useful, they only address certain types of questions, such as what are the goals and strategies of these religious organizations, what are the determinants of political religion-inspired political behavior, including electoral behavior or grassroots mobilization, and this sort of questions. But it's within those approaches, it's harder to understand why religion would be such a strong source of political mobilization in the first place. What is it about religion that makes it so effective in this respect? Keeping in mind that it's religious rewards are uncertain, are what's called compensators by Stark and Bainbridge, or credence goods, goods that the quality of which you cannot be sure when you buy them, to use this economic metaphor. So something that you can determine only in the afterlife. So and still, religion is one of the major forces of political mobilization. So to address these types of questions, I argue we need to go to yet another level, a micro level, where the point of departure is a human being as a biological creature, evolved biological creature, rational and emotional subject, and also a member of social group, interact with other people. And so we need to use the insights of approaches such as evolutionary psychology, social psychology, anthropology, or evolutionary approaches to both religious studies and political science to understand the interaction between religion and politics on this more basic level. This evolutionary approach, especially in political science, are not really in the mainstream. It's for many reasons it hasn't been fully accepted that there are very important evolved sources or cognitive traits that can at least partly explain political behavior just as religious behavior. And so for me, the study of the religious groups, mostly communitarian religious groups, religious communes, is the best available natural experiment in how religion and politics interact on this basic level. What is the political role of religion? And I think that we can use the insights from this, from the study of such groups and the political dynamics within these groups, to also shed some light on the early stages of development of social development of humans, even though obviously I'm aware that we cannot just take the results in the study of contemporary religious communities and transfer them to Pleistocene hunter-gatherers. But on the other hand, if we accept that there is some evolved element to human behavior, we would conclude that there must be some similarity in terms of reactions to similar situations, similar social stimuli in this types of groups. So, so I think that we need to, in trying to explain the role of religion, including social and political role of religion, we have to start with giving account of its function. Religion is something that it's a very costly, energy-consuming, time-consuming endeavor for humans. It bears a lot of costs of all these buildings, the sacrifices that people make, the cost of supporting religious functionaries who are themselves unproductive. All of this needs some explanation beyond just dismissing it as a parasitic mem, as Richard Dawkins would have it. So it has to, if it's still there, if it has endured as a major social force for thousands of years, it has to perform a certain important functions. And I think that as with most social institutions, this basic, most fundamental function of religion is solving the problem of cooperation of non-related individuals, because this is what humans had to do in order to progress from the basic small hunter-gatherer group to complex civilizations. So ultimately, morality, politics, religion are some sort of solutions to this problem of how to get non-related individuals to cooperate, bearing in mind all those problems connected with free riding, with establishing and stabilizing effective cooperation. So religion does this in a number of ways. One of this way is the supernatural watching mechanism, something that I refer to as under his eye hypothesis, referring to the Handmaid's Tale here. So when at a point where the basic social control, face-to-face social control, peer control, was not enough to uphold or to police the social norms, then religion came with this ingenious invention of a morally concerned supernatural agent watching constantly 24/7 and imposing sanctions, mostly negative sanctions, punishments. We know from the first Ken Kahneman, for instance, that this negativity bias and loss aversion, making negative sanctions potentially more effective in policing behavior. And so we've had this situation obviously for a long time, but we now have very smart social psychology experiments that prove this when groups are primed with supernatural concepts and their level of cooperativeness is measured by some simple economic game like dictators game. And we actually find this correlation that the groups that are primed with supernatural concepts are more generous or more pro-social than a control group without such priming. So this is just one example, but here I'm concerned with another such mechanism, which the mechanism of costly signaling, and yeah, so I'm using the costly in the project that I'm doing now. I'm using the idea of costly signaling, the theory of costly signaling, and try to give it a political interpretation, presented as a mechanism of empowerment in religious communities. The costly signaling theory has been adapted from evolutionary biology, or from behavioral ecology, more precisely, where it is used to explain the certain behavior of animals, which is not easily explicable in basic evolutionary paradigm of individual fitness. So, for instance, you have the famous peacock's tail, which is obviously draws attention of predators. It's heavy, which means it is more difficult to escape. So it's the question is, why would it evolve if it handicaps its bearer? Or there's a certain species of gazelle where the predator approaches. Some of them leap in the air, expending a lot of energy that should be used to escape. So so again, and also making themselves visible to a predator. So the question is, why would such a behavior that seems to decrease the chances of survival of individual evolve in the first place? And the explanation is that this is a sort of signaling behavior where this individual signals to the predator that he's so fit, so strong, above average fit and strong, that he can still escape even though he uses his energy to these unnecessary leaps. Which and this is this signaling kind of relationship is beneficial for both sides, because now the predator knows that it's an honest signal, so the predator knows that it doesn't make sense to attack this particular individual. It's not worth the effort, whereas the individual escapes the attack. So this kind of mechanisms evolved ultimately for the benefit of the signaler. And so if you apply this logic to social systems and to humans, now you have costly signaling as behavior that shows the willingness to cooperate. So it's something that individuals may use to somehow support their credibility within the group by engaging in such risky or some or other less costly behavior. Individuals show their commitment to the group, and from the point of the group, it performs the function of being able to eliminate the free riders, to determine the actual distribution of certain traits. In this case, the willingness to cooperate within or across the members of the group. This can come in what I call a hard version, where the costs are actually fitness costs, decreasing the survival reproduction chances, or just efficacy cost, the cost of producing the signal, energy and emotional and whatever costs go into that. But in general, costly signaling theory explains some religious behavior, which is obviously full of such kind of sacrificial behaviors or acts, as this sort of signaling behavior that solves the basic problem of credible cooperation within a group. Now the types of costly behavior I'm dealing here with I grouped into ascetic and ecstatic. Ascetic behavior actually has to do with some sort of deprivation, either self-inflicted pain, suffering, seclusion, fasting, celibacy. Those sort of behaviors are quite common in religious groups. Obviously, mostly they are fitness costly in the sense that I just explained, not necessarily. Whereas ecstatic behavior are all those displays of spiritual possession or some superior contact or relationship with the sacred, trans, frenetic behavior. etc., which is mostly efficacy costly, bearing the cost of producing the signal. And now the concept of voluntary costly signals that I propose challenges the implicit assumptions of costly signaling theory, that first of all that the signals are obligatory, such as the obligatory signals of commitment, or for instance initiation rites that a new member of the group has to undergo to prove his or her commitment. It can be a novice entering monasteries, by the way, are also very good examples of religious communities, not just those 19th century sects that are mostly invoked in this connection. So those signals of commitment are usually obligatory, whereas signals can also be voluntary. So some members of the group, some individuals may go beyond that what is required and display some extra asceticism, for instance. And by doing this, they can indicate traits other than just commitment to the group. There's other, the crux of this political interpretation is that those other traits are connected with leadership qualifications. So by making those costly sacrifices, either ascetic or ecstatic behaviors, these individuals signal traits that qualify them in the eyes of the group for leadership, and in this sense they are empowering, because they can increase the members, the individual status within the group, or uphold their bid for leadership position. So they still voluntary costly signals still perform this basic function of costly signals, helping the group distinguish between honest and fake signalers. This time with regard to leadership qualifications, the function is perhaps even more important than in the case of signals of just commitment, because determining who is fit for leadership is obviously very important for the group making the right determination in this respect. So what precisely do these religious voluntary costly signals indicate? Some sort of extraordinary relationship with the sacred, like direct communication, being able to, for instance, to receive revelations from God, etc., or even the ability to control the sacred, like in shamanism, or the shaman can control the spirits for the benefit of the community, or their superior eschatological status, being holy, whatever it means for a particular group, or some superhuman features that predispose the individual for leadership. So voluntary costly signals ultimately may serve as transmitters of the signaler's claim to power or status within the group. Now, to make this interpretation somehow operationalizable, I propose certain conditions of plausibility of this interpretation when we're dealing with some behavior and try to determine whether we can interpret it in this way. So such behavior should obviously be costly, entailing either fitness or efficacy cost for the signaler, and then this cost has to be real, be, as I said, non-obligatory, but importantly performed by the minority of the group's members, which basically is a condition that stems from a theory of power. We need to have, or want to have, some power differential to be able to talk about these signals empowering the signalers. Indicate a trait or feature that is desirable or esteemed by this particular group, and use the group's symbolic repertoire to express it. Obviously, certain behaviors that, for instance, in some other social media, you have a entirely different meaning. If a person self-mutilates or castrates him or herself today, the person might be confined to a mental institution, but in some groups it might have completely different empowering meanings. So it's important that it is expressed within the group kind of symbolic universe. And so I just want to briefly conclude with two examples that I've been using empirically. The Skoptsy, a very good having an example of the ascetic voluntary signals. Skoptsy was the Russian heterodox sect in especially in 19th century Russia, that was at odds with the official Russian Orthodox Church. They were known for preaching castration as an ideal, something that purifies an individual from sin. They performed castration either in the small version, they called it small seal, which meant the removal of scrotum and testicles, or in males, or sort of the great seal, the removal of penis. Also, there was also, although less seldom, castration of women, removing nipples or labia. So that's what they are known for. I try to analyze it through those criteria that I formulated before, and definitely castration was voluntary. So there wasn't an entry requirement. There were members in good standing who were not castrated for their entire life, although this was an sort of ideal, but not everybody did it. Castrates constituted, from the sources I had access to, distinct, sizable, but still minority within the group. But all leaders were castrated, which suggests a connection between higher status within the group and this sacrifice that can be interpreted as signal, political signal. Castration was also interpreted as a sign of special eschatological status, special proximity to God, or even already achieving salvation. The example of ecstatic voluntary signals I'm using here is the Shakers, the American group. And the Shakers came to America in the 18th century from England. And they are still around, by the way, although there's just one village left in Maine with just two members. There are two Shakers in the whole world left now. We are witnessing the death of this religious group. But Shakers were famous for the name of the group comes from this ecstatic behavior, trance movements, especially in the early stages of their existence. This ecstatic behavior was transmitter of the doctrine of continuous revelation, meaning that they believe that the leaders can continuously communicate with the spiritual world, receiving revelation messages. And actually, the mode of succession, initially, the first two successions among the Shakers was what I call the battles of gifts over the graves of the predecessors. So when the first and second Shaker leaders died, the community gathered in the graveyard, and the challengers for their position of leadership staged a kind of charismatic, ecstatic performances. The ones who were more credible became leaders, were acclaimed as the new leaders of the group. So there was clearly this very important ecstatic signaling element to succession, to political succession within the group. And it also could have, could be collectively empowering. There was a period in the Shaker history in the late 30s and the 40s of the 19th century called the era of manifestations, where members of certain underprivileged classes or groups within the society, such as young women or the members of the communities within the villages that had a lower status, began to receive a series of revelations from the spiritual world, the deceased leaders of the group, or even from the likes of Napoleon Bonaparte or George Washington. And by transmitting those messages and by being the sort of instruments or mouthpieces of the spirits, they could profoundly alter the power dynamics within the group. So they could, for instance, claim that the spirits want such and such person be expelled from the group, or such and such norms be introduced. So for some time, they were able to use this ecstatic behavior, this ecstatic signaling, to empower themselves within the group and to change power relations, at least temporarily. So to conclude, I propose this as one of the mechanisms that Joost was explaining the relationship between religion and politics, in addition to mechanisms which show how religious ideas legitimate political power. We can also try to show how religious behavior can have a political significance, can be empowering in these groups, at least with perhaps some consequences for the big picture, also for apart from just communitarian religious groups, although it's not that easy to clearly spell out those consequences. So that's, but definitely costly signaling theory as such can help explain certain behavior that we can see also outside of religious communities in, for instance, political sacrifice when it comes to behaviors like suicidal, terrorism, for instance, or other behaviors that are not so easily explicable in economic or rational choice theory terms. Okay, so I'll finish there, and I'm happy to answer questions also concerning other issues if you're interested in religion and politics in Poland. For instance, I'm also happy to address this. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Maciej. So as I said at the beginning of the talk, feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A box that you can find at the bottom of your screen, and I will ask Maciej the questions then, your questions. And as Maciej was mentioning, you can ask questions directly related to the talk, or a little bit more broadly related, that is in the field of religion and politics. And since religion and politics is still, or since religion is still very important in Poland, I would say more important than a lot of other European and North American countries, you can also ask Maciej about questions specifically about Poland and the broader political situation there and the role of religion in it. I will start out by asking a question that is somewhat related to the talk. I'm not in the field of religion and politics, so I don't really know anything about it. I do know a bit about signaling models and so on. So I was wondering, so you study theocracies and you also study contemporary democracies. And I was wondering how sort of the strategy of signaling and costly signaling would differ in these two types of environments, and whether, for example, it's, I mean, given actions in a democracy would be perceived as more costly and so on. I don't know whether it's a good question or maybe it's a stupid question to ask by somebody who doesn't study religion, but I was wondering whether you could say a few things about that.
Okay, well, I think the signaling concept, as you said, could be applied in some other environments. It's just a communitarian group. Probably the reason why it's mostly it's probably most effective as an explanatory theory in relation to those communitarian groups is that they are perceived to be the behaviors demanded of the members are definitely more costly than for a person living outside of the communitarian context and engaging in some political activity, even religion-related political activity in democracies, because being a member of a communitarian group bears a lot of different costs, including opportunity costs of lost opportunities of other ways of life, and so it's in this context it has been actually used to explain the one of the problems that I study in my project, which is the differences in longevity of the groups. So that it was observed that in general, religious groups, religious communities, especially, are much more last much longer than secular groups motivated by some sort of, let's say, utopian socialist ideology or whatever. So that's one difference, but there are also differences between particular religious groups. And there was a study done by Skoptsy and Breslov, who took a very large sample of 200 or something religious communities in the United States and analyze them in terms of the number of costly signals that they demand of their members, and found that this is actually significantly related to the longevity of those groups. So here the relation is quite clear. You can show it statistically. I suppose similar mechanism may be in play in democratic context, where you have religious movements, for instance, and people engaging in those movements and also making some sort of sacrifice. This sacrifice will be different, of course. This is not celibacy. This is not, living as your family and moving to the group. But you can show your commitment in other ways by going to engaging in some direct political action. spending your time, committing your time to the movement. So the same basic mechanism could probably apply there, only that the intensity of signaling would not be the same, because you can probably you can argue that it takes much more sacrifice to be a member of a religious commune, especially celibate religious commune like Shakers, for instance, than to act or to show commitment to certain ideas in a democratic context and a non-communitarian context. But yeah, the same general logic I think could apply as well.
And can you apply sort of this idea of costly signaling and the longevity of religions? Can you apply that to sort of not to sort of communities, but to sort of the general broader religions? Like, can you explain why, I don't know, the Catholic Church or so has survived for so many centuries based on the signaling that it requires, as opposed to maybe some other groups or sects that do not last as long because the type of signaling that they require is different?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if we can use just this theory to probably there are so many different reasons for why a church is more successful than other churches that it wouldn't be. I mean, I'm not sure if I can make such a compelling case for the entire religious tradition. Definitely, the same logic can apply to certain segments like monasteries, for instance. And I think that this is monasteries are very similar to religious communes, and you can argue that imposing certain strict rules on the entrance and on the members, once they accept these rules, they also rationalize more, and there are certain psychological mechanisms that once you make this commitment, you stick to this commitment, because the costs of living rise as you spend time or more time in the group. So definitely you can extend this to similar environments. For the entire church, there are also a lot of micro level, I would say, considerations that we would have to use to show, for instance, why some churches are more effective than other churches in realizing their political goals, and that's surviving as institutions. That's something that Anna Jamal, for instance, did in her book, showing why some churches, or even the same Catholic Church, can be more politically effective and survive as a moral authority in some contexts opposed to others. But that's connected with the strategies that it uses, the institutional access strategy, or in certain environments it may be more beneficial for the church to use institutional access as opposed to electoral mobilization, for instance. So I think that those macro level considerations would be more pertinent here to those large religious organizations.
All right. I want to take the topic of conversation a little bit away from the talk that you gave and a bit more toward Poland. And since you are from Poland, you mentioned that you would answer questions about that too. But that doesn't mean that if anybody else in the audience wants to get back closer to the talk, that it doesn't mean that we wouldn't do that. So if you do have questions about the talk specifically, anybody in the audience, please enter your questions in the Q&A box and we can get back to it. So about Poland, the Catholic Church has had a strong influence in Polish politics, I would say, more so or for a longer time than in a lot of other countries in Europe. even though the influence of the church, I think, is waning in Poland as well, just like in most other European countries. And there have been some connections, I guess, with the current regime, with the party that is in power, the Law and Justice Party. Now that party doesn't have a good reputation in terms of its adherence to democratic values and so on. It's being heavily criticized in international media. The European Union is not happy about what the government has been doing in areas of judicial independence, media freedom, and so on. So most political scientists would say that Poland has been backsliding away from democracy back to a more autocratic form of government. Now, what is the role of the Catholic Church in all this? What is the current situation with this respect? How is the Catholic Church within Poland reacting to these evolution, and does it play a significant role in this?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I think the answer is that it doesn't really play a significant role in this process of, as I said, democratic backsliding now, because it has long realized that such keeping a high public profile on directly political issues and supporting particular political parties, including those that are in power, is not beneficial for the church. This politics of sponsoring political parties or speaking very openly in political or electoral campaigns in favor of parties that the church used in the 90s has backfired, and the public opinion polls clearly indicate that whereas Poles are quite tolerant and they accept certain displays of religiosity in public places, like the crosses in public institutions, or the church, or speaking out on moral issues, or religion in schools even, it does not accept, like there's just 10 or 15% of people who accept the church, 10 people who are going to vote or supporting particular candidates. So this hasn't been part of the strategy of the church. The church is obviously, as you said, it's ideologically close to the Law and Justice Party, and so it supports certain ideological issues on its agenda, such as the abortion issue, and the government opened up a few years ago the abortion debate again to kind of support the church's stance on this. But in general, the church is on defense now. As you said, its influence is waning, and this is due to a number of factors. One is obviously the scandals, the pedophile scandals, the role of the bishops in covering this, like in many other countries. But it's also the fact that Poland has the highest rate of young people withdrawing from the church, or so the next generation will clearly be much less religious than the current the generation of their parents or grandparents. So all of this is concerning for the church. They spend more time defending themselves from accusations of sexual misconduct or these types of things. So they don't enter the political debates directly. There are few comments on whether the particular decisions or actions that have been criticized, the government actions such as the limiting the independence of the courts, the centralizing of power, etc. The church is mainly silent in those issues, only intervening in issues that can clearly be presented as moral issues. Abortion, in vitro, and this LGBT rights, this sort of thing, but not the current politics, really. So there is a difference from what we could see a few years ago, especially in the 90s, where actually the church was actively participating in politics, for competing for political capital, symbolic capital with the state, I would say. So, yeah, that's.
All right, thank you. Then another question that is closer again to the topic of the talk, a question from the audience by Jeff. Have you considered not grouping at the level of secular versus religious, but grouping in terms of any and all available affiliations, sports clubs and so on, whatever that may be, and then applying the attribution, level of commitment, engagement, and so on, to see the relationship across multiple groupings? What might strong signaling look like in these terms?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, and obviously this whole concept of costly signaling is not confined to the religious context. I explicitly use the term religious costly signals because I understand that signaling can also be secular. Even in religious groups, some of the behavior, the commitment to everyday life of the group can be signaled through means that or actions that are not religious, and also in non-religious groups, you can have the same type of behavior, and some of the examples you gave come to mind. The fan clubs, for instance, the motorcycle gangs, or whatever, or groups that need reliable signals of commitment, also because they are sometimes because these groups are breaking the law, for instance, and they need to make sure of the loyalty of their members, and they might demand both as an entry requirement and as a sign of ongoing or signal of ongoing commitment, certain costly behaviors. Also, these behaviors may be permanent bodily markings, and this is something that both some in some tribal groups and also in gangs you can see this, because once you take on this bodily marking, you are very strongly connected to the identity of the group, and it's very hard for you to join another group because you were the signs of belonging to another group. So this is a very strong sign of commitment. So yes, definitely you can extend and use this this concept for other contexts, where especially those where such strong signs of loyalty are needed for the coherence of the group.
All right. Okay, thank you very much, Maciej. I think we've come to the end of our talk, our meeting today. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. The last thing I want to do is I want to invite our audience to our next talk, which is a week from today, specifically at 1 p.m. On Thursday, the 17th. We have Gabriele Magni coming in from Loyola Marymount, and he's giving a talk about LGBTQ politics and the far right in Europe. It will be our first talk of the year that will be held in person and online. So you have a choice there as to what way you want to attend. And we very much hope that a number of you will attend and that a number of you will attend in person. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.